morning and welcome to Dublin City FM. You're listening to CouncolMatters with myself, Mick FitzGerald, on this relatively bright and benign Dublin morning. And I'm delighted to welcome into the studio our first live guest for 2018, a long-standing friend, politically and socially, Elizabeth Davidson. So Elizabeth, welcome to East Wall and welcome to the North Side.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on, as our leader says.
Elizabeth, now, as I said to people, you and I think I first met you at something that used to be called the National Forum on Europe. Do you remember that august body?
I do, and what I also remember is I remember some great speeches there about the virtues of Europe, and I became more convinced about Europe, even though it's not all wonderful, but
I would be inclined to agree with you, because I went to quite a few of them over the years now. Some people I know said it was just a bastion of privilege, and other people said it was a talk shop. Do you think it's not having it there now is a deficit?
I think from the minute it went, I think it was a loss, because there were people who came forward and you heard their voices, and now it's everything is terribly choreographed. Whereas before, people were able to have a free space in which to voice opinions and be heard, and different people, not just the run-of-the-mill politicians.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've got one at home, because it was one I went to, I think it was in College Green at the hotel there, and it was Hans Blix. And it was Hans Blix had just come back from Iraq, and he was pretty much saying, there's no nuclear weapons there, there's no weapons of mass destruction. And that was very important, and really wasn't that well reported in the media, and I suspect very few people have a copy of it now.
Yes.
But things like that, I think, is far more important than some of the nonsense that we get coming up, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it didn't cost that much, really, and it wasn't a huge saving. So, I mean, to have taken that away, I think, was very negative.
Yeah. I mean, although I must admit that one of the most negative ones I ever saw was, now people might say in hindsight that they were being very forward-thinking on this, but when Turkey was very, very keen to get into the EU, there was a guy called Ali Babakan. He was the foreign minister from Turkey at the time, very articulate, a very well-educated man, and he brought a high-powered delegation. And we had county councillors lecturing him, and it was just cringe making to watch. Who are these people that leaving aside whatever else you might think, this man paid us respect.
Yes,
of bringing.
No, I didn't. I
don't think you're right. I remember meeting you at the. Up at the ones at not at City Hall, up at Dublin Council.
Yes.
But again, some people would remember you particularly for, was it the 2009 Dublin West by-election, or was
yes,
it South West?
It wasn't even South West. It was Dublin South.
Dublin South. Yes. You went up in what we will call the George Lee by-election.
Yes.
What's your memories of that? Because mine are actually very negative about particularly how Irish politics works and how RTE works. You weren't expected to get elected, you didn't. You went up against a couple of heavyweights like Alex White and George Lee, neither of whom are in the Parliament anymore. But how did you feel about that?
Well, at the time, I was put there to try and keep the Green vote. That was what we were trying to keep the Green vote up. And no, I felt that the George Lee thing was really, really an embarrassment, because you'd arrive up to your little meeting with the local people, and George Lee would arrive with 4 jeeps and park them on the footpath and leap out. And
were these Fine Gael people, or?
Indeed they were. The party leader was with them. I remember distinctly going to a sale of work and being mown down by the Taoiseach.
Well, the later Taoiseach, because it was Enda would have been the leader at the time.
The leader, yes.
It's interesting again, because my memory of that is that at that particular time in 2009, I reckon you would have got good odds that Enda Kenny would never be Taoiseach. He really wasn't. It
wasn't a good election for him, or that series of elections. Yeah. But I thought that George Lee was unfortunate, and he wasn't the right choice, because when you heard him speak, he wanted to lecture people. He didn't want to listen, and that's what half the battle is listening to the voters.
Yeah.
He was not a person who he has to be quite right.
It's interesting then you would ask yourself, well, how did somebody like that get to be selected? Was it purely what we would call the brand factor? That this was a man, he was on your telly most nights of the week on the 6 o'clock news, he was the economics correspondent for RTE. No big background in politics, no political experience, no track record.
No, you're Donald Trump, if you like. The same phenomenon of a household name.
And what's interesting, I find, because this was around the same time, if you go over to the north side, when Enda Kenny had become enthralled, is the way I would put it, to Brodie Sweeney, because and Brodie went, he ran in Dublin North East, as we say, without troubling the scorer.
Yes. Well, I mean, I always give kudos to anybody who runs, because it's not nothing. But
But more to the point, and this is what we were talking about before we came on. George aside, leaving the personality aside, he was in a high-powered job at RTE, and he decides, I'll have a bit of a sabbatical and try my hand at politics. And then a couple of years later, well, I didn't really like that. And it's not that he made major contributions to the Oireachtas anyway. And then he walks back into RTE. Now, if that was me, if that was you, and you quit a job to go into politics, I suspect that'd be your luck. How do you feel about RTE's, shall we say, largesse to their employees in that regard?
Well, I suppose that, yes, that's one thing, but also that George Lee wasn't really committed if he only took a leave of absence. If you were only if you weren't going into this for the long haul and for the good of the country, and as he said himself, to put his shoulder to the wheel and make his contribution, making his contribution as long as his own contributions were acknowledged. I mean, and as soon as the Fine Gael party said, well, look, we don't want to listen to you anymore, you've got the seat, grand. That's the numbers.
And you're not getting Richard Bouton's shadow ministry.
Yeah, exactly. So so then he sort of says, oh, well, I gave my year's leave of absence, and now it's just about to run out. I think I'll go back to RTE.
Yeah, it's great.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
I know, it's jammy jobs for some.
Yeah. You also ran in local government. I mean, okay, you didn't get elected there. Do you have any regrets that you didn't, looking at the way local government is now panning out?
Well, I suppose the first time I ran, it was also new. But I know an awful lot more about local government now than I did then, and I certainly have no love for it at all. I think it's pointless.
Do you think we're overrepresented in Dublin? And they all keep saying to me, oh, well, compared to other parts of even Britain, that our local government reps are representing far more people than...
Well, of course, if they were representing them, that'd be one thing. But as far as my local reps, as far as I can make, they couldn't. The last person they want to hear from is me.
Yeah, you're in Rathfarnham, are you?
I'm in Rathfarnham.
Yeah, and that's on South Dublin Council.
Yes, and when you contact them, they either don't reply or say something rude, and
that's extraordinary.
It is. It is.
Well, usually I cover South Dublin Council, and I don't. I'll be perfectly honest. I find a lot of the councillors okay, but I don't quite know what's going on with South Dublin Council compared to the others, because all of the others webcast their meetings.
Yes.
So if I can't go to Tala, which is quite common, you can always look in the next day. I can do, like for instance, I spent yesterday looking at Dublin City Council's meeting on Monday night. That's great.
Yes, and
Dunleary and Fingal.
Yes.
But South Dublin Council, for some bizarre reason or other, they can't come up with a coherent explanation. The one that's bandied around all the time is cost. But I keep saying to them, if you pull the four of them together, surely there must be some cost saving there.
Well, they have no difficulty spending money on other things, so it can't be that much of a cost, and it would be to everybody's advantage to have public viewing of it, because we would see
it's accountability, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yes, and also we would see who turns up and who does their job.
Yeah,
and
although to be fair, I have to. I won't say I've got a gripe with Dublin City Council because it's not necessarily their fault. But I tuned in yesterday to hear a debate and to see a vote. and the one thing I tuned in to see is not there.
All right.
Yeah, now I don't know why, I'm still looking for an explanation, but nevertheless there was a very good debate towards the end about College Green and traffic in College Green, so I was delighted to be able to get that and discover there. But we're not here to talk about these issues on the north side. What's your focus, and has been for at least 6 months that I can recall, Elizabeth, is the issue of Massy Estate and proposed developments by South Dublin County Council, and is it Quilta?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Tell us first of all, tell us the background in the sense that how did you come across this and what's essentially your perspective on it?
All right. Well, I mean, Massy's Friends of Massy's Wood has been in existence. Well, that's our group. Has been in existence for 25 years. So we've always had an interest in the woods.
Sure. Can you just let people know where Massy's Wood is?
Massy's Wood is as you leave Rathfarnham and you're heading towards the HellFire Club. The HellFire Club is on the right-hand side. Massy's Wood is on the left. It's a 100-acre broadleaf forest, and it was a private estate in the times gone by, and it has beautiful historic plantings which has been all overgrown and lovely old buildings, half of which have fallen down. But it is a magical resource for people to walk in, and it's and it's a lot longer than 6 months. We've been obsessed with this now, but last.
Concerned, no obsessed. I should remind listeners, the Elizabeth that I know is a very rational person.
Yes. Well, we have, because there was a plan, we became aware of a plan to build a visitor centre on Montpelier Hill, which is the hill.
Which is where the HellFire Club is.
Which is where the HellFire Club is. And also to build a bridge over the road to bring visitors into Massy's Wood. Now, Massy's Wood is fragile environment. It's beautiful leafy paths. It's a wonderful ambience, and to bring what is proposed as 300,000 visitors a year into that without destroying it is not possible. Now the idea of building a visitor centre of such scale and unattractiveness on the HellFire Hill is actually a very dubious question, and it is baffling why South Dublin County Council wish to do this. And
okay, just to shall we say broaden the discussion to it, my only real understanding of this area, we have a burial ground in Woodtown.
Indeed.
And when I go out there a couple of times a year, because people are getting older and whatever, what I see is rural. I see narrow roads, I see hilly roads, very, very difficult to park. And one thing I can assure you I've never seen out there is public transport. So I'm presuming that all these plans are contingent on private transport and parking and all of those exhaust fumes and so on and so forth. The 300,000 is one thing. Getting them there is another,
absolutely,
isn't it?
and well, the current proposal is to obliterate a whole stand of trees which they have been asked by the Department of Heritage not to interfere with, and create a 300 car park, and then to bring coaches up from Tala and from the basketball arena to the stadium.
Yes.
So you have a shuttle bus every 15 minutes is what they have proposed. Now there's going to have to be about 6 shuttle buses to get up every 15 minutes.
Because they're very narrow roads, aren't they?
Extraordinary narrow roads. And then there is a proposal to put in a one-way system with a stop-go lights and so on like that, which will slow down the traffic even further. And as you say, it's a rural area. It's farmland all. When you come up the Gunny Hill where the burial ground is, up to your right is all farms.
It's all farms, isn't it?
Yes.
It's absolutely rural there.
Yes,
yeah.
and bringing this a number of people is going to impact greatly on farmers, and it impacts even at the moment the overcrowding of the car park at the weekend. Yeah. It means that farm vehicles can't get up and down, or even safety vehicles can't get up and down.
Is that the proposed route that they're going to go from, say, Tala, and then go up that narrow hill, Gunny Hill, and then get to,
that's,
roughly speaking, what
that's one of the proposals, and the other proposal is to come up Stocking Avenue, which is quite a long circuit. It's one of these new,
one too.
Yes, so that it could be up that way as well.
Yeah. And if we actually look at this, break it down somewhat, let's be honest, at this time of the year, 300,000, and roughly speaking, about 6,000 people a week. So they're probably not going to get more than a couple of hundred this time of the year. What you're going to get is maybe a 3 or 4 month window when you're going to get maybe 250,000 people. Now, just again from my experience, if you've got traffic, even a shuttle bus going up there, and there's a funeral, which is quite conceivable, or even a stone setting or something like that, it's just going to be a bottleneck all the way up there, and particularly because people will park on the side of the road as they have to. There's no, it essentially will narrow the road in half.
Yes.
So it seems to me that just even on that projection alone, they really need to have a look and see, well, what are the routes you're going to take. That's before you even decide what you're going to do.
Yes. I mean, it's in a way that the concept is very flawed, because, I mean, yes, a visitor centre in the Dublin Mountains, it's a good idea if you have a centre that people walk from and learn about the Dublin Mountains, but this centre wasn't conceived as that, and this is why it never has delivered the idea, because it was conceived as an area where people would come from. And out in the evening and have fine dining, and wear their evening clothes, and then have cruise ships coming in, and the people from the cruise ships coming in. It's not.
Well, that's the interesting one, and we had this out in St. Anne's about 20 years ago when we came back from Australia. And I'll explain my thinking on this one with you. Is that I'm presuming that there will be a commercial dimension to what they're proposing up at the HellFire Club or thereabouts, because when we had a proposal from Dublin City Council, there was the old red stables in Clontarf, and they swore to us blind at the time that oh no, this is going to be an arts and crafts centre, and we're going to have visiting artists, and we're going to have resident artists and all of that. None of them are there anymore. There was a restaurant which they put in, and I have a sneaking suspicion even that has closed down. But the only thing that's there now is a market, which is a commercial market, nominally a farmer's market, but try trying to find a farmer, and a very successful coffee shop. But the stuff that they told us was just either it was fabrication or it was intended to fail. And I just wonder how you feel about the same thing there. Is this what we would call a backdoor to a commercial enterprise?
Well, I don't see how it can be commercial, because the cost of this operation, unless South Dublin County Council is going to just swallow all the cost, all the 15 million, and then rent it out as a coffee shop, which is...
Well, this is what we were concerned with, and I'll go back to it, because in Wollongong in Australia, where we know a little bit about, they did something very similar, a bit of a visitor centre, or information centre in the Botanical Gardens. And they had a little bit of a coffee shop there as well, and it wasn't really all that successful. So lo and behold, it's now a restaurant that have people coming in and eating in the evening, with all the consequences of traffic and all of that. And that's why I just wonder, are they being what we would call in Ireland a bit of a cute whore?
Well, this is the suspicion, because there is no way it can make money without it being a big restaurant. And then this is not the place. And what they're going to do is destroy the archaeological heritage that's on the site, because it hasn't been properly examined or identified. Destroy the biodiversity, the habitats of the squirrel, the badger, the deer, and so on like that, quite blatantly stating that that's going to be the case, without having done a proper study. Destroy the possibility of the Massy's Wood ever being investigated or mapped or looked at and properly restored. All because they haven't actually consulted with anybody except themselves, which is really bizarre.
Can I ask you, Elizabeth, I mean, we know about, if you like, because we've had South Dublin Council on here, and they were telling us their perspective on it. They were giving all the good stuff, that there's going to be it'll revitalise and it'll be bringing visitors there. And we didn't get too much into the economics of it. They will tell you that it will not damage the environment or anything like that. The council itself, the elected representatives, I'm not hearing doom and gloom out of them. I'm not hearing, oh, let's get to the barricades and stop all of this. What have you picked up about the political dimension to all of this? Nobody over there seems to be really, shall we say, vigorously opposed. They'll talk about it occasionally, but they're not really saying that this is a life and death issue. Is it because there may be not many voters up there, for argument's sake?
Oh, well, there are plenty of voters. We have 12,000 signatories on our petitions. We lodged 5,000 physical petitions with South Dublin Council to demonstrate that there are voters up there. I'm not sure. The councillors all seem to be terrified if they speak up against something the council wants, that they won't get funding for their own little pet projects or something. That could be just complete surmise. But they're definitely lacking. They do not want to engage with us anyway, that's for sure.
Well, what's interesting, because you're the first, I think there was another one group that was opposed to it, but the issues that people have contacted me about in South Dublin, I mean, there was, and I got this from all sides, and I went out there, was the issue of schools versus green space out in Fairhouse.
Yes.
That was a huge issue there, and rightly so, because there were strong views on either side. The other one that people are coming to me about as well is the Scientologists. Now, those people really don't even know all that much and will not be affected by the Scientologists, but it seems to me that the ones that will get the headlines or the ones that will generate local interest, and strangely, and I'm not disputing this, I just am curious, because to me this is an issue. I know the area in the sense from my days in the Scouts, and at the very least it needs discussion and examination.
Absolutely.
And I'm just curious as to why you think that might be. Is it not sexy enough for the media?
Because I don't think the councillors are actually being asked very much about it. They weren't told. They weren't engaged. They were just informed. And I went to the council meeting at which the final plans were presented to them, and the map was illegible on the screen. And one of the councillors, in fairness, asked for a legible map, but the rest of them were not interested.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
but the other thing was that it's supposed to have been given its permission by now, and you know.
So what stage is it at the moment?
The council, the On Board Panola asked for further information, and the submissions for further information closed on Monday. So that's
last Monday gone.
Last Monday gone. So this is going on nicely. It will be right a live issue when it comes to the elections next year.
In 2019.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, maybe that's what we needed to become a real big issue,
Well,
isn't it?
we need them to sharpen up. But the other thing is, where is the money coming from for this? 15 million is a drop in the ocean, I'd imagine. I think 15 million was what was proposed for the Dunleary Library originally.
Yeah,
and they cost much, 32?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you. I mean, a lot of these figures tend to be a bit rubbery.
Yeah,
we get the low estimate at the beginning, and then by the time we finished it, it's quite different. Yeah.
And where is that money being taken out of? There's no social housing in South Dublin County Council. You know, it's just ghastly.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I just want to broaden the discussion slightly, and I wonder, but yet at the same time related to the area we're talking about. What I'm seeing on Dublin City Council, we saw it this week, twice in one sense, about cars in College Green. We also saw it out of the so-called issue about the seawall in Dollymount. You know, are we going to lower a seawall to so people in cars can see how the Wicklow Mountains. I mean, people on roller skates can see it, but that's a separate matter. But I'm just wondering, what I'm perceiving is a reinvigorated private motoring lobby. In other words, we are getting people, particularly elected representatives and particularly councillors, we're getting them hopping up and down. On the one hand, they were talking last year about protecting a biosphere. This year we're concerned that there won't be enough road for motorists. So you can't have your cake and eat it.
No. And if the people cycling in Clontarf can see over the wall perfectly, so perhaps people in the cars should just get out and cycle. But I think that what we are actually concentrating on, and as I went to the airport this morning, this cloud of smog over the city, absolutely dreadful. We're not doing enough about our emissions. So something needs to change, and change drastically. And the fact that cars are still allowed into the city centre, that all that College Green area should be a car-free area. It should be for pedestrians, cyclists, and the Lewis, which is of course a menace for cyclists at the moment.
Well, Paddy Smith, the Fine Gael councillor, he made the valid point that we have invested this massive amount of money in the Lewis. I've taken the new Lewis.
Yes.
I'm very pleased with it. However, if you're going to make it work, you have to have some sort of through flow. And about 3 months ago, I was sitting in a bus on a Friday evening in College Green, and I thought to myself, when that Lewis starts, if you don't do something about this, it is going to be a serious mess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, they have to make it work.
Yeah. So on that basis then, Elizabeth, because we're going to have to go off in a moment, South Dublin Council, I mean, you were talking to me about Edmondstown Road that seems to be collapsing. The whole thing, we all seem to be hugely concerned about the private motorist, but yet I'll go down there, you'll see it on your way back into town if you're going there, one person going in their car and all of that. And somewhere or other we need to change that culture. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. But also I would say that the idea of bringing coaches and cars up to the HellFire Club knocks out all the cyclists who go up there every morning and every Sunday. Yeah. Great pelotons of cycling clubs.
Would you be happy with one of those chairlifts?
the Sinn Féin chairlift. 25 quid a help.
Yeah. Elizabeth, unfortunately we've run out of time, but keep us posted on this, because if there are developments, we get you back in. And I just want to say, in about a week's time, you're going to be a grandmother again.
Yes, that's it. I'm looking forward to that, little boy.
Give our love to Chris and Una. That's this week, Council Matters. I want to thank Catherine for doing such an always fabulous job on the desk. I'm Mick Fitz, where Elizabeth Davidson is our guest. We'll be back in a week's time. You take care.